morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Happy Friday. Today we have Scott Gillum as our guest. Scott is the founder and CEO of Carbon Design, a marketing services firm that specializes in personality-based marketing. Prior to founding Carbon in 2017, he founded and led the Washington, D.C. office of Eero, the largest B2B agency in the world. In 2015, Scott partnered with Pat Spencer, co-author of The Challenger Customer, to build Challenger Marketing, which Carbon Design executes for clients today. In 2007, his work on integrated sales and marketing funnels became the subject of a Harvard Business School case study. Scott is a columnist for the Media Post and the founder of B2B Hub on the Drum, where he contributes a monthly post. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you, Taylor. I just realized my bio dates me, so.
Also with me is Usman Sheikh, the founder and CEO of XIQ. Prior to founding XIQ, Usman served in several vice president roles with global responsibility at SAP, including sales enablement and digital commerce. He's a regular lecturer at leading US business schools on how AI is transforming B2B sales. Welcome, Usman.
Hey, good morning. Happy Friday, everyone.
Happy Friday. So Usman, today we're talking about using personality-driven selling to close those deals in Q4. Why don't you kick us off?
Okay, so great. So Scott, welcome. You've been pioneering this whole area of personality-driven or personality-based marketing, and we've been pioneering the technology that can help you diagnose or understand the personality behind the people that are making the decision. So this has been a great collaboration, and I think it's really timely that we get together to kind of look back and see what are some of the lessons. You've been now, Scott, what, 4 years working with us on using psychometric driven analysis and combining that with how B2B sales and marketing works. Tell us a little bit about what's going on.
Yeah, I think it's been an interesting journey. I mean, we started out just 4 years ago, just looking at the personality of individual buyers, and then really got ramped up and it became very interesting when we started to work with clients to take deals apart and pull in from the account side and from Salesforce, the individuals who were involved in those deals closing over 12, 18 months, and then looking at the dynamics of the personalities in terms of the way the behaviors that we could actually view through the sales process. So being able to see group dynamics, understanding the relationship between personality types, understanding the behaviors of different personalities, has been fascinating to watch that and continue to advance that. And we'll share some of our advanced thinking today.
Yeah, that's really great. And I'm really looking forward to digging in. The way we've structured our conversation today is we're just going to ask a little bit about what Scott has really discovered. How has the world of B2B selling and marketing changed over the last couple of years? So very interested in getting, the pulse from Scott, who's been in the field working with companies. And secondly, as the title of this webinar suggests, this is a workshop, it's a clinic. Our goal over here is to show you how you can apply the methods that Scott's been applying in the field, the techniques he's been applying, along with the XIQ platform to really unstall or unlock some of your stalled deals in Q4. So I'm really, really excited and looking forward to being able to get to that part. But Scott, let's see, you've been, we've been talking for quite some time, and, we're also talking to a number of academics and analysts. We belong to that community. What are your key observations? Like, how has B2B sales really changed, right? What's the difference? You've been at it for a long time, right? Sorry to date you again. But tell us a little bit about what's really happened in the last 2-3 years.
Yeah, well, I date myself even more. I mean, I started my career out carrying a bag and going door to door. So a lot has changed. Biggest, I think, for everybody, and it's very obvious, is the remote selling, right? Virtual selling and not having the interactions that I used to have when I was a sales rep, being able to sit down and really read the person on the other side of the table, pick up the little cues from body language and really try to understand their situation by looking and understanding corporate culture. So a lot of things that came with face-to-face that we don't have anymore. I think the other thing is that the amount of tools that we have, and we were kind of talking about this before we got on the line today, is that there's just proliferation of tools that allow us to see a lot of things that are happening at the account level. But you need to know more than that. And I think we're capturing all this information, and it is showing some behaviors, at least from intent, or we're picking up these signals. But unless we really understand the behaviors and the personalities behind that, you really don't truly understand intent. And so I think there's a lot of really good things here, but it hasn't gone far enough yet.
Yeah, one of the questions, Scott, that we keep asking and we hear is that the number of decision makers in the cycle is going up, right? And so we see a lot of this where you're selling to more than one person. And as you know, Gartner and so on say there's the 12.5 decision makers involved in a typical B2B cycle. It's a long sales cycle. So that's where probably what you're talking about, where personalities start making a real big impact, knowing who the people are involved in the decision-making cycle.
It's fascinating, and I forgot to mention this prior when we were talking through this, is that when we evaluate deals, we look at deals that close and we look at deals that don't close. There are a lot of people involved, but what's really interesting in deals that close, there's only about a half a dozen people who really drive the sales process or drive the buying process through to closure. So even though people may come in and out, and if you think about the old RACI charts that we used to do, right? Responsible, accountable, consulted, et cetera. People are consulted, but when you look at the core buying group, I don't know that I've seen it beyond a half a dozen people. And typically it's like about 3 or 4 people who really drive the process. And to understand who those people are and what their motivations are, that's where this insight around personality really comes into effect, because it really is a smaller group than you actually think of. And we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, let's move on to the next slide, because I think, just digging down a little bit into what you're saying, which is that, there's a few set of people that you need to convince. But even in, a lot of the conversations, we also hear that, the buyers are spending a lot less time with sellers. Yeah. So there's a lot of internal discussions going on. There's a lot of online and research that's going on and investigation that's taking place. And now the person that's trying to bring you into an account, your champion, basically has to convince others as well, right? So the multiple decision makers, it's not you talking necessarily to 12 people, Scott, is it? Or is it like you're talking to 1 or 2 people, and then those guys hopefully have to be the people that can convince the other 12 or however many people that are in the buyer group, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly. And if you look at some industries like cybersecurity, for example, that industry is very difficult for salespeople to make any kind of gains in terms of access to the buyers, because the dominant personality in that industry is the conscientious, the skeptics, and they're very difficult to work with for a number of different reasons. But they also, when you look at where they get their information, they get it from their peers. They're really heavily reliant among their peers and highly skeptical. So in order to be able to enable them to work the internal buying group is really important, because you're not going to get a shot at them. You really have to be able to enable your champion inside the organization to advocate for you and to figure out how to get them to advocate for you and your solution. It comes down to really understanding how you make the personal connection with them.
That's really interesting. So Scott, what you're saying is that now not only do I have to convince my champion, but I need to be able to enable my champion to be able to convince his or her peers.
Yeah.
And so basically it's sort of like proxy selling, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Yeah. In certain industries, it's very difficult for you to go beyond your initial contact. They act as blockers. They don't allow you to go around. They are very conscientious in terms of the way that they approach anything that's new. So you really had to figure out a way to connect with them and do it in a way where they see a win for them and whatever your solution is.
Yep. Perfect. So let's go to so what is personality driven selling? So obviously, XIQ has created a platform where we tap into all public digital breadcrumbs that are available, and we tie it back to behavioral map, and we predict the personality types of these individuals. And these personality types come in really handy when you're navigating, as we were talking about, through now this group of people, somebody being your champion. And later on, Taylor is going to come back and show us how this works in XAQ. But Scott, you've been with the Challenger people quite some time ago. Tell us a little bit about what is your perspective on personality-driven selling and marketing?
Yeah, so I mean, this goes back to 2015, and Taylor mentioned this in the intro. Pat Spinner and I, when the Challenger customer was coming out, they had really great research about what they called the mobilizers, and the mobilizers were members inside of the buying group that actually moved. They either started the buying cycle, or they were able to move the buying cycle forward inside the organization. And we worked pretty diligently trying to figure out how we could identify those people, because they had attributes, right? The mobilizers had attributes, and we were trying to figure out how we could identify them inside accounts, and we really couldn't come up with a way to do that. We then defaulted to say maybe we needed to use content and different types of content to see if they would hit that content based on their attributes and their behaviors. When we met Usman, when we met you a few years ago and saw what your tool was able to do, it became very easy for us now to match personality types with the attributes of those mobilizers. So what you have on the screen here, we are able to identify personality types that lend themselves to being coaches, and those attributes match up with those mobilizers as well. The doers, those people also match up with what they call the go-getters in the mobilizer. And so we were able to put those two things together. Not only were we able to understand individual personality types, we also understand their role in the buying group and what kind of role they played inside that buying group when they got together with other peers, and how they interacted with the peers. And by knowing that now, we know how to advance the entire buying group, not only the individual, connecting to the individual on a personality or on a personal level, so they see a win for them, but also understanding how to move the entire group forward, which is really going to be important in not only Q4, but next year when we run into a really heavy recession. Understanding how to move that buying group forward is going to be critically important.
No, that is so true. I was just having a conversation yesterday with one of my colleagues, and we were saying that, look, it's really in tough times that you have to sell. In good times, when the economy is good, sales can somewhat be a little bit off the pedal, right? There's a little bit of order taking place. But when things get tight and budgets get cut, that's when you really need to step it up and go out there and actually sell. So Scott, yeah, exactly correct. You've been working with us now for almost 4 years, using our platform in conjunction with the methods and the techniques that you've been pioneering. So tell us a little bit about how let's play it out. What happens, right? What does this look like? This is the kind of workshop part. And I guess if people want to take out their paper and pencil and start following Scott, would be a good time, right?
It's old school. Even there's a lot of technology, still, pen and paper is actually very valuable sometimes, at least for some of us. Yeah. Looking at, the years that we've been studying how deals get closed and how inside of accounts the buying group moves, there are 4 key components to that. One is identifying your audience. And this is an area, if you have an ABM program, you're going to have all the contacts identified, or a lot of the contacts identified in an account. And if you're working in the enterprise space, you're going to have a lot of contacts. Not all of those contacts matter. And we'll talk more about the key audiences and how you identify those. Once you understand those audiences, you have to understand their motivations and behaviors, because they can work for you and that can work against you. And so you want to understand your situation. I mentioned, when we were doing some of the prep, we just finished designing an ABM program for a client, their biggest account opportunity, and it was stalled. And it was stalled because of the personality type that they were dealing with. So we'll talk more about that. Once you understand his motivations, then you understand your audience, how to move them. Then you have to get to the basic business case, right? So you have to be able to make an argument that demonstrates that there's some kind of return here. And I'm going to talk about how that return is going to shift. I'm going to talk about what is typically the business case that we articulate if we're selling a technology. And I'm going to talk in a recession or in a difficult time where clients are pulling back budgets, how you need to extend that and make it even stronger and make it even more impactful on their business. Once you have that, and this is where the understanding your audience and the personality and the behaviors and the motivations of your audience comes back into play, is once you create that business case, now you have to loop it back and communicate back into the buying group in a way that makes sense for those individuals, and they can see value in why they would want to advocate for your brand or solution. And that communication has to be personalized. And so we'll go through kind of the dynamics of this as we keep going into the conversation.
Yeah, I look at this chart, and this is exactly what is happening in our sales cycles, right? Multiple decision makers, you need to identify who they are. So, the visualization and the understanding becomes really, really important. And then the communication aspect, understanding their motivations and how to, really kind of thread the needle with these individuals, right, becomes really important. And then, as you're saying, how do you communicate it in there, right? And the last thing I see that it's almost a common denominator across every single customer with demonstration of return on investment, right?
Yeah.
How does this pay back? Like, nobody's buying fancy terms like ABM and things along those lines. They want actual tangible proof points now, right? Yeah. So great. Let's move forward, Taylor, if you don't mind. Scott, take us through what is your method and how are you going about, what is your proposal in terms of how do we install or unlock these stalled deals in Q4 in 3 months? That's pretty fast.
Yeah. So this is a result of a lot of experience with clients over the last 4 years of really figuring out what moves things through a buying cycle. And what we've identified, if you think about the axis that it is running from the top left to the bottom right, that space on that side, the upper right-hand quadrant, users and functional areas, this is where the beginning of a sales process or a buying cycle starts. It starts over here, and it may start with a functional head, someone who is like the chief revenue officer or chief risk officer, someone in an executive role that has been triggered, they've been disturbed, or they've seen something as an opportunity, or they've talked to a peer, most likely a peer, if they've heard something. And then they typically will ask a user, someone in their group, to do some investigation, right? And so this is where our intent data comes out. And this is where, all these systems are triggering that people are hitting your content. And that's the beginning of the process. If you think about the lower left-hand quadrant, the IT procurement, this is typically the back end of the buying cycle, right? So if you're selling a technology, which almost everybody's doing today, IT is going to be involved. Someone in IT is going to be involved in either integration or implementation or consults somewhere through the process. And then someone from procurement, whether it's the higher level finance or financial officers or a board decision, depending on the size of the deal, or you're further down in procurement. So this is kind of the playing field, right? This is in a sense, this is your playing field. And if you layer the next view on the slide, then you start to think about the tiers inside the organization. And this almost represents an org chart, if you will, right? So you have the small leadership team that's really important. This is typically when we target the C-suite. This is the leadership team that we're talking about, right? Then you have VPs. And as these circles go out, the amount of people in those roles also expand, right? And so what you have a tendency to see is the directors are really important in our data because they oftentimes are the ones who are consuming our content. In fact, when we look across 5 industries, we've looked at tens of thousands of people who've responded to some type of marketing outreach, whether it's a webinar or a live event, or it's downloading white paper, whatever it is. 60% on average, director manager level is hitting that content. So pay attention to them. They're very important on an early process, but we also want to watch what their behaviors are and where things are headed. So if you layer the next slide on.
So just hold on to that thought, actually. Yeah. Go back one, please, if you don't mind. So you're saying directors, but a lot of marketing is geared towards C-level marketing. Yeah. A lot of selling is you got to go start at the top, right? So you're saying something very different over here, Scott.
Yeah, and I've said this to our clients who are marketers and CMOs, is that your audience is a director or manager level, right? Sales audience may be VP, budget holder, decision maker, right? But for marketers, it's at the person who's going to be bringing you into the organization, right? Our goal as a marketer is to get someone to take action, get them to download something, get them to view something, get them to attend something. Our sweet spot is at that director manager level, and that gets the process moving. That gets the information in the door. Consider it the door open. That's really important and is often very much dismissed because sales is saying we need to talk to the C-suite or we need to talk to senior decision makers. That's true. Sales does, but marketing doesn't.
So would it be correct to analyze this chart and say that what you're saying is that you would, as a marketeer, start at getting the director and the manager level, and then move inwards towards the VPs and the leadership?
That's right.
And sales would be the people that would be more likely moving up that leadership chain.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
That is correct. And when we map buyer's journeys and we map the individuals in the buyer's journey, we map also roles. Users are always consulted in the buyer's journey, right? So they may not have decision-making ability, but they do have the ability to knock vendors out. They are consulted in that process, and they're consulted in that process in the middle of it, especially when we go to piloting or you're experimenting or you have a trial run. It is the users that are feeding the information back to the decision makers. And so, those people are very important to your success.
Okay, so very interesting. So you're saying that marketing should be targeting directors and managers,
yes,
and sales will be moving it further up the leadership value chain. So tell us more. Show us, what is this now?
So this is a typical view of an ABM program, right? So recent client, as I mentioned, 35 contacts within their biggest account. And those contacts were populated in their ABM program based on the consumption of content or hitting the website. They use demand-based, not to throw out things, but Salesforce, they're using a bunch of different tools. And now a salesperson, in this particular case, a global account manager, has this view of all these different people, right? And typically marketing will cover all these people in terms of whatever communication goes out. But the important thing, as we went through this process, and this is an important thing for people who are listening to this webcast, is just because you have all these contacts inside of an account doesn't mean they're all important, especially if you're selling. In fact, it can be a distraction by having too many. And so by understanding the personality types, their behaviors and their motivations, you really get a chance to narrow this down to the few that are really important to moving you through the organization. And in fact, that client I just mentioned had 35 contacts. There was only really 11 that mattered, and there was only 7 that actually can move an opportunity forward. And so I'll talk a little bit about this in context of what you see now. The green, right? Those steady personalities are difficult, and they show up at the beginning of sales process. They're very difficult to move, and this is why they're difficult to move. They only move when the buying group moves. So they are team players. They're very nice people. They're oftentimes the coach for reps, but they won't move. They won't take a leadership role, and they only move when you get the entire organization, the group, to move with them. Right?
When you say the green, you're referring to those color halos.
Yes.
Around the pictures that you're seeing in there.
Yes, those different personality types. Now you see the red personality types, those dominants, those are very good people to have a relationship with because they're the doers inside the organization. So you think of that slide you showed earlier about the doers, those dominants move things through the organization. So here in this particular example, and in the case with our client, it was a director level, but they are the ones who are moving things through the organization. Because if you think about this, as you go through a buyer cycle, someone has to stay attached to your solution and continue to move it. And senior executives come in and out. They'll show up at the very beginning. They'll show up at the very end, but they're not going to take it on. They have too much on their plate, and they have too many different responsibilities. And a lot of times, depending where you are in the organization, their budgets are allocated to their team. They don't even own a budget. So those people who will stay attached and keep moving and keep advocating for you, very important, very, very important. But you have to be able to continue to reinforce the value. So interesting thing about dominance is they're very career oriented. So if you can highlight what's in it for them, recognition side of the organization, what it does to the performance of their team, you've got to keep communicating back to those individuals to keep them motivated, what it means for them personally. And they're the most emotional of all the people you're going to deal with in the account.
Right, right. And you've got an ebook that you're going to be promoting over here later, which actually helps people understand how to go around these different kind of blockers.
Yeah.
A couple of quick questions before we move into Taylor maybe demonstrating or us going a little bit further into this. So how do you find, so you said that there were 35 people that the account had identified as key contacts within that company, correct?
That's right.
And this is just as a aggregated view across all the different salespeople, marketing people, other executive leadership that had been in touch with the client. And they have identified about a universe of about 35 individuals that they should be involved in. And then within that, what you start doing is based on engagement scores, you can actually start seeing who are some of these top people that are most engaged with your marketing, for example, right? And then also look at it from a decision tree perspective, an influence perspective, and then map it out. And then now what we're seeing, for example, over here with the triangle, I believe is like those are the three key people that have been identified as really moving the bar.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, Scott, we don't even get FaceTime with three people, right? So it's got to be one of those guys that has to be your champion, basically.
Yeah, and you're building their talk track, right? So you're helping, let's say, the director of analytics needs to talk to the VP IT. They have to sell you. They have to sell what you're offering to that personality type. And this is a dominant talking to a conscientious, right? Conscientious are skeptics, and they're going to want to know facts. They're going to want to see a project plan. They're going to want to see use cases and case studies. That's what you have to arm your key contact with, because she's going to go make the argument with him, and she needs to be armed, and she needs to understand the personality type she's up against. And this is a key about communicating back. Personality types have preferences in what they want to see in terms of content. Conscientious want hard fact, data backed, research backed information. They don't want opinion based, right? And they want to talk to their peers about it. Dominants want to see themselves in the information. They want to see a case study that looks like them. As close as you can get a case study to a dominant, to being in their industry and being someone in a similar company, the more that's going to resonate with that buyer. So they have preferences. When we talk about channel preferences and content preferences, those are very personal preferences. And understanding their personality types helps you align even the language, even the content, even the content you craft is very specific to personality types.
Great. So Taylor, are we moving forward and seeing? Yeah, there we go. So let's see what Scott's been talking about. We've XIQ emulates a lot of that. So show us, how do we do personality driven selling using this AI and AI-based platform, Taylor?
Of course. Thank you, Usman. So this is XIQ's Sales Xelerator, the one-stop for buyer group, company, and industry insights. I'm currently on the homepage that hosts relevant target account information, but to show you the power of XIQ, I'm going to search for a name in the navigation bar. In this case, Scott Gillum. You can search by a company, first name, last name of a person, title and company, or again, that account that you're researching. So here we have Scott.
Nothing like putting you on the spot, Scott.
We can see that Scott is a motivator personality type. XIQ gives me tips on how to communicate and build a relationship with Scott, never having met him before. Scott likes to investigate innovative concepts and is comfortable with frequent change. I could double click and XIQ will provide me with more detailed breakout of his personality type. And we've added a new feature that predicts my affinity with Scott. Affinity gauges the compatibility between you and the person being viewed. So here you can see that Scott and I have a high affinity. XIQ also recommends how I could best engage Scott over time. And as we're building our account plans, I can also check Scott's affinity with another person. So Usman, for example, we see they also have that high affinity as well. Scott, you must be a really easy person to get along with.
Yeah, we have to ask my wife.
And this is really just the tip of the iceberg. XIQ also provides more details on Scott, such as when he's in the news, his social media posts, his career, educational history, and any personal details. And now that I've really found Scott to be a buyer and I've identified him as a decision maker, I can go ahead and add him to our buyer group. XIQ's buyer group gives me an overview of all my decision makers and helps me uncover who would be a friend, a foe, or a neutral party in that sales engagement. And XIQ's AI places individuals into one of 3 different categories. We have our doers, the confident, fast-paced individuals who are motivated by success. We have our coaches who are problem-oriented, expected to take immediate action, but can be inconsistent. And then we have those blockers, those really strategic thinkers who tend to be a bit speculative. So knowing upfront how the different people in a buying committee may react helps me lower the risk of being blindsided. I can also start to move people around if I uncover they should sit in another group. For example, Scott was a coach, and now I want to move him over to my doer group. I can write a note to justify that move and hit save.
This is important. So this is where we are moving these people around, the buyer group around based on our interactions with them. So Scott, you must have come across this as well, where there are, what would appear to be blockers, but you can forge relationships by really understanding their personality types, for example, right?
Yeah.
And bring them across into the doer or the coach group and kind of neutralize them or even win them over, right?
Yeah, the strategists you have, for example, Claudio here, the conscientious are, in especially for young sales reps, they will feel like they're a blocker, but they're not necessarily. You can convert them. And in fact, if you are able to convert them, they are actually your biggest advocate. And they show up at the end of the buying cycle. A lot of times in buying groups, those personality types people default to in the buying group because they are so skeptical and they are so detail oriented. And many times they're the subject matter expert. They go deep in areas. The buying group defaults to that person for final decision. So that's a really important person. You can't convert them. You have to do your homework.
Okay, great. So, and Taylor, what you were showing us, that was also really cool that we moved some, Scott across and you had to annotate a little note next to that. And you can basically see these notes if you wanted to track like where and how, the different people within the organization are engaging with that same buyer group. So that's the other thing, Scott. It's not only that we're talking to 12 people, but there are like 5, 6 sellers also working in there. There are many people having in that conversation with those multiple clients as well, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Exactly. And then XIQ also provides a highlight tab that puts all our buyers' social media into one place, eliminating the need to research them one by one. So again, we have that never-ending feed. And then in addition, Usman, to knowing your buyers, you have to be aware of what's happening on a company level. So I can search a company in the search bar. In this case, we looked up SAP, and we get a detailed dossier on that particular company. At the top, we get an overview, what they do, key financial metrics, top executives, and more. And as we scroll down, XIQ provides even more information to do all my account research in one place. Those sales triggers, so anytime a key account is in the news, social media, videos, staff, financials, competitors, and more. Again, saving you time.
Yeah, I want to kind of also draw your attention to 2 things over here. So folks, situational awareness in deals, right? So one is to understand the personality types. And we, Taylor demonstrated, we use the engine to find a person the engine tapped into behavioral science, was able to predict a personality type. We were able to form groups. The groups were further segmented into different types of doers, coaches, and blockers. That's one aspect, understanding the human dimension of the purchasing decision group. The other is the information that needs to go in to actually start those conversations, because at the end of the day, you have to actually sell. And in order to sell, you have to have relevance, and you need to be able to frame discussions within the context of the customer. So here, where we have triggers and where we need to do research, XIQ comes in extremely handy in being able to help you find news that you can use to start those conversations with those different individuals in the buyer group. And I want to draw your attention, if through your cursor, Taylor, you can kind of write over this graph thing that we have on the right-hand side, in the top right-hand side, these where the metrics are. XIQ is one platform, and these metrics are indicating the marketing engagement. So that people from SAP are having with campaigns that are being run through XIQ. So that workbench engagement where we see that, those are the emails from a marketing perspective that are being sent out to this particular company. And it tells you how many emails, how many opens, clicks, etc. they've had within that company. And so again, it's a great reminder that business is moving into real time. And what's happening in marketing when that director is opening an email that Scott as a marketer may be sending out, then immediately it reflects on this dashboards and tells the salesperson that they need to take some action with that person, right? So again, fairly comprehensive view of being able to use the XIQ Sales Xelerator, one, to understand people, two, to build these buyer groups and then monitor the relationships by moving people around, and three, total situational awareness in real time. And that situational awareness becomes the reason, the fuel with how you move sales decisions forward, right? You use the breaking news, new product launch. That means I have an opportunity to upsell, or leadership change. That means I need to go in and do certain things, right? So let's go back, Scott. That kind of brings us up. Now that we know the landscape, we know the people, and we know what's going on, we still need to go through the ROI and the business case. So what are some of the changes that you're noticing? I see on this slide, old and new. So tell us, what was the old business case and what is the new ROI case?
Yeah, I'm genericizing this, but when you look at a lot of way that people are positioning their technology-focused ROIs, or and particularly their value propositions that they articulate, it's around, enhanced security, and these are just examples, but I'll make a point here is these comments around the technology and the value that technology has as we build an ROI isn't enough, and it won't be enough for next year to really get traction inside of the organization. Because what is happening is, and this is not always appreciated about B2B buying, but in B2B buying, the decisions that are made in that environment with those individuals who are making those decisions are more emotional. They're more emotional involvement in purchase decision making in B2B than there is in consumer world. And the reason for that is there's higher risk. You make a bad decision with the budget of an organization, get yourself fired, right? Especially if you're spending, 6-7 figures on an investment, you got to be certain in that. So the old ROI case or the old value propositions that we put out have to now become connected even into more of a business impact. And they have to be connected in a way that not only shows an ROI on your tool or your technology or your solution, but also to the organization. So being able to show that, and here's here's a couple tips for people who are selling right now. We're in the labor shortage. Almost every organization has open positions. Building a business case around those open positions is really important. Retention and ability to be able to staff the teams that you have at full capacity right now, that's not going to go away. We're in a worldwide shortage. So being able to connect that is really important, because if you're selling professional services, for example, an open position or turnover in that position, that's $167,000 lost revenue opportunity per head. And that's the way that business is run. And so as we start thinking about making these much more impactful statements, try to connect beyond where you are. So if you offer, for example, increased productivity, something that can increase the productivity of a certain group, take that all the way through to understanding what that means in terms of efficiencies in the organization. Can I get away with staffing a project with 3 people when I used to have to staff it with 6, right? That's impactful because we have open positions, because we have turnover and we have a labor shortage. Draw that all the way to the end to really communicate what that's really, the value of that. And so putting numbers against it, quantifying it, making it aligned to business impact, not just the ROI on your technology or your tool or your solution.
Well, I could also say that, where you say technology focus could be related, kind of replaced by product and feature focus, right?
Yeah.
People really highlight like different, like instead of enhanced security, whatever the key features of the product are. And it's really difficult to kind of justify on a feature basis because there are lots of variables like adoption, for example, right? Or really true differentiation, especially in a lot of technology products today, the differentiation is very paper thin. And so in that space, to be able to demonstrate what is your uniqueness and your ability to be able to, really move the numbers bar, right? The revenue bar, the outcome bar is very, very important because, again, heading towards a recession or probably are in a recession, almost invariably, the hundreds of calls we've had in the last couple of months, number one question is demonstrable ROI, right? Every single person wants to know that.
Yeah. And I'll just play this out in that client example. And I think here's the important thing about what's going to happen or is happening right now. Companies are shifting their priorities, right? And so where you fall with whatever you're selling and that need that it fills, you have to figure out where it is on that priority list. Before, when things are good, this investment may be the upside of it was that you are keeping pace with your competitors. Now it's a different priority list, and it may be being efficient so that you can make your way through a recession. So you have to understand organizations' priorities and how they're shifting based on the fact that we're moving towards a recession. They're clawing back budgets. They're becoming more constrictive in terms of their spends. That's important. The other thing is kind of talking this through as it relates to communicating back to personality types. The example I was talking about, 35 contacts, only 11 matter, or 11 were important. 7 were actually the ones who can move things forward. When we communicate back, the person that was the key contact for the sales account team was a steady. And this is a personality I mentioned, you have to move the entire group. But the interesting thing about a steady is that they are the most empathetic, right? So you couldn't communicate and move her. In fact, you're wasting your time even trying to close her. Studies will not commit to a close. You have to move the rest of the group, and they have to feel like the rest of the group is on board, but they're very, very empathetic. And so we were able to feed back and apply pressure to her by going after the amount of open positions that existed inside the organization at the office level. And so this particular company was in architectural engineering construction projects all over the country, 56 different offices. They had 2,500 open positions. We can narrow that down to individual offices, and we can narrow it down to the number of projects that were understaffed. And we could communicate that back to her by the pressure that was applying to project teams and the risk of having turnover in project managers, which are incredibly important. So we wouldn't move her by making any kind of connection with her personally. We had to bring it in through the fact that she was empathetic and really felt the pain of team members and use that avenue to move her.
Beautiful, beautiful. So we're, a lot of your experience, a lot of our platform has now a lot of experience. And what we're doing is, we're really committed to this Q4 target, helping our clients and prospects really take some of their stalled deals and use the approach and the platform. We've got really, really good examples of being able to, unlock deals that have been stalled for quite a while using the techniques and the platform. We're fairly confident that in 3 months, you will, and that's Q4 right there. You're going to be seeing some impact as a result of this. So what we're doing is we're bringing to market. Scott and XIQ, Carbon Design and XIQ are partnering. Scott is bringing his expertise in personality-driven selling and marketing, his understanding, doing deep dives. Scott, you'll tell a little bit about it as well. Deep dive into accounts. And XIQ will be the platform where the buyer group will live, where the intelligence will live, real-time intelligence will be coming. And so it'll be a really nice combination. And as a result, once this consulting is over, that's considered almost like a kickstart consulting. And we call this the kickstart consulting offer, where you can actually kickstart some of your deals. Great idea to do it now in Q4 and get ready for 2023. And you take technology, you take the platform with you, you know how to use it. It's extremely easy and intuitive to use. And you are actually putting it, as we were talking about, into the use case, into your use case. Yeah. And Scott helps us define that use case. And then the platform is where that use case exists and kind of lives with your sales team. So tell us a little bit more about the offer from Scott, please.
Yeah, Usman. One of the things that we've noticed, because we've looked at a bunch of technologies and tools available, both on the sales and marketing side, is that there's nothing there to really help managers or coaches help their teams understand how to move a group forward, right? We have things that tell us about individuals, but those individuals are inside of a buying group, inside of B2B, and you need to understand how do you move people. Like the example I just gave, this particular contact was the key contact for sales would not move on her own. You had to move the group to move her. And so that's the important thing, is that we're going to provide that insight on how to be able to coach through those opportunities that may be stalled and reignite them by understanding how do we move that buying group. And as you mentioned, it gets put into the platform and the technology so that it lives there and you can continue to manage it. So we'll design it. We'll tell you why things are stalled. We'll tell you how to move it forward. And then that gets it embedded in a way that you can scale it. The offer we have here is, if you attend the webinar, we'll provide this ebook that we have on navigating blockers as a starting point, but we can go much deeper inside your accounts.
Yeah, I really want to highlight this. People come in and their clients and prospect talk to technology overload, right? Too many tools. And again, folks, anybody that knows XIQ, we are B2B. We have built this specifically for business to business sales and marketing use cases. It's one platform. And now we have a world-class coach, a pioneer of the personality-based selling methodology, who's going to be actually walking you and your team through the steps on how to mobilize this platform. And how to scale using that platform. So it's a great opportunity, really good deals available as well. And I think our team must be posting something on the chat, which is where you can go and register for a quick 15, 20-minute call with us to see if, how we can potentially offer you these services. Let's go to the next slide, please, if there is one. Otherwise, I think we're ready to start Q&A. And here again, guys, you can look at our affinities. I'm a driver guy, and those are my traits, and that's Scott. I think we can work together pretty well. Scott likes to work and engage and collaborate, and I like to drive things through. So I think that's a good combo, Scott. I hope so.
Your comments are great combos. Absolutely. You look for that in your accounts.
Yeah. So any questions?
There's some questions coming into the chat, and one of those is, how long does this take to get started?
So let me go first, and Scott, then you can dig in. So folks, it's really, really easy. So two things. First of all, Scott's ready, and he has an engagement method that he wants to bring out. And our technology is all in the cloud. You sign up, and within 24 hours, it's ready to go. So it's a matter of contacting us. And again, on the chat, they're putting the link to where you can sign up. And we'll, Scott, maybe tell us a little bit about once the technology is immediately available, our onboarders can start showing, but then putting out the use case, doing the deep dive. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, and it's not just me, by the way. It's my team. So
oh yeah. I mean,
I'm just one person. It's our team. Yeah, we just need to really start with understanding the account contacts that you have. That's the starting point, and we start to drill down from there. And then it's a very collaborative process where I think what's exciting for us is that we're working with sales and marketing together. And this is what's really interesting is once we are able to start giving you insights about what's going on inside the account, you'll see the things that marketing can do, and you'll see the things that sales can do to actually get this thing moving again, or find a way around why it's stalled. And the interesting example, just to continue to extend that, was in that particular case, sales was blocked. Sales could not go around their two key contacts because they would take it personally. Remember, I mentioned they are very emotional and empathetic. They would take things personal. And so when you fed that back to the head of sales and the global account manager, like, oh my God, we've already picked up on this tension. So it really needed marketing to play a role. And so we talk about marketing and sales coming together. Once we get inside of your account and start diagnosing what's happening, you'll see the role where sales and marketing really have to be very collaborative in this.
Yeah, and our teams also, the Carbon team and the XIQ team have also worked together. So, our enablement team and our support team will be there helping you set up the platform very, very rapidly. It's pretty quick shot. So, and folks, again, I want to draw your attention to the chat. There is a link over there. So if you want to sign up for these services, or ask or inquire more, that's where you can put them up. And I think Taylor is going to be sharing that as well. Are there any other questions that we have? There we go. That's where you can go, and the link is up there. So if you can start out over here, happy to start a diagnostic call with you guys ASAP. And really, really good way to get your Q4 started. And as Scott said, Carbon's consultants come in, they deep dive, and they start working it from that point. And as they're going along, they're showing you, and our team is showing you how to incorporate and weave in the XIQ platform as well. Taylor, do you see any other questions, or are we all set with time?
Only one. Where can they sign?
Okay, we just pointed that out, right? So
yep.
We can.
So that's the last sentence from the chat. Again, that link will be in the chat if you want to sign up. And this webinar will be posted to our website, and we'll be sending this out to the registrants for you guys to share as needed. So again, happy Friday, everyone. And Usman, Scott, always a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Taylor. Thank you, Scott. Great job. Appreciate you being here.
Great.
As always. Yeah. Thank you.